So if you remember back in our discussion about GDP, we talked about the difference between real and nominal GDP, and what we want to think about now here in Chapter 13 is the idea of inflation and how it can be measured. Remember, we said real GDP was nominal GDP that had been adjusted for inflation, so we want to think about what inflation is and how it's calculated, and then what the consequences of inflation are. So measuring inflation is a kind of a tough job, I guess. If we think about how inflation works, if we think about the changes in price level, I'm just going to take one good, and we'll think about one thing that me and you probably commonly buy, and that's a drink from a soda machine or a Coke machine in the building or at school. And those used to be 75 cents. And now they cost $1.25. If we think about what that change in price has been over time, just from we'll say yesterday it was 75 cents, and then today it's $1.25. The change in the price of that Coke is 50 cents, right? Well, the 50-cent change doesn't tell us a whole lot. We need to know if 50 cents is a big change or a small change. We need to know what that change is relative to what the price used to be. So we don't just look at the change in price, we look at the percentage change in price. So we calculate the percentage change as the change in price divided by the original price. So the original price was 75 cents, the change in price was 50 cents. So that change in price from 75 cents to $1.25 is a percentage change of 0.5 divided by 0.75, which is 2/3 or 66 or 67%, right? 66% change in the price of that. And of course, that's over a 10 or 12 year period. So it's not measured annually. Inflation is something that we'd like to know from time period to time period. And so what we want to think about is how can we calculate the change in the overall price level. And so the U.S. government calculates something called the Consumer Price Index. And the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is calculated the same way we calculated that change in the price of a Coke. The change in price, that is the new price minus the old price, divided by the original price. But we want to do this for the prices of things that are normally bought and sold in our economy, and so this is a pretty big task, right? So what the government agency, what the workers do is they calculate the price for a basket of goods that consumers normally purchase. And so what is it that consumers normally purchase? They purchase things like housing, they purchase automobiles, they purchase fuel for the automobiles, they purchase all kinds of different foods, all kinds of different consumer electronics, durable goods, washing machines, dishwashers, refrigerators. They purchase blue jeans and tennis shoes, and they purchase suits and dresses. And so all these things that consumers normally purchase, what they do is try to get a basket of good that's representative of what consumers normally buy in a year or in a given period of time. If you've ever gone to the grocery store, this process is like when you see in the grocery store one grocery cart that is filled with groceries right next to another grocery cart that is filled with the same groceries, and it might be at Food City or somewhere like Ingles or Kroger, where they have the receipt and they say, if you bought this basket of goods at our supermarket, then you would have paid this much. If you bought this basket of goods at our competitor's supermarket, then you would have paid this much. See how much you save by shopping at our store. This is the similar process. So they go around the country and they look at the prices of housing and automobiles and all these things that consumers normally purchase, and they take a sample in this year. They do the same thing again in the following year, and they say if you purchased all this stuff in the year 2011, then you would have paid this much for it. If you purchased all this stuff in the year 2012, then here's how much you would have paid for it. And we calculate the inflation rate by the percentage change in the bottom line of the prices of all those goods. So we look at, here's the price in 2011 for that representative basket of goods. Here's the price in 2012 for that representative basket of goods. And the inflation rate is calculated as the percentage change in that bottom line price of the representative basket of goods. And so this is one of those things where we say we do the best we can to figure out what's happening to prices over a given period of time. Obviously, we have a very large, dynamic country, and so the prices of things vary across the different states and across the different towns, and so it's important that they draw samples from different geographic regions, which is sometimes difficult to do. It's slow to include things that are new consumer goods. For instance, it probably took a while for them to include an iPad in the consumer price index. I know that it was a long time before things like cell phones were included in this representative basket of goods. And so if you look at the representative basket of goods, it necessarily has to change over time. So in 1982, the representative basket of goods would have maybe included a record player or a audio cassette player with the price of a cassette and no real anything that resembled something like a cell phone, right? They weren't even imagined, or anything like a smartphone that almost everyone has now could not have been in the representative basket of goods 30 years ago. And so we have these changes in the things that consumers ordinarily buy, and we have a vast change in the quality of these things. If we think about a record player compared to an MP3 player that we can now carry around, a multitude of vast amounts of music that we can carry around in our pockets, so we couldn't even imagine what that record album collection would have looked like 30 years ago. These changes in what consumers buy and the changes in quality, it can't be reflected by the change in price. It's just hard to imagine, and that's over 30 years. So if we're looking back in the early 1900s, the only way to have portable music would have been to carry a band around in the back of your truck, which would have probably not been a thing that consumers commonly did. Let's think about what inflation does. If your nominal income, that is, if the dollar amount of your paycheck stays constant over time and the price level rises, we can ask, does that effectively make us richer or poorer? Are we better off or worse off? And I think it's obvious if you earn $50,000 year after year after year, and the price level, the prices of things that we purchase increases year after year after year, you can now buy less stuff with the same amount of money, which means that you're effectively worse off. That is, your nominal income has stayed constant at $50,000, but your real income, the amount of goods and services that you can purchase with that $50,000, is going to decrease over time. If we have savings if we have our wealth as savings, say in a savings account in the bank, as the price level rises, that just like our income, the purchasing power of the things that are of the savings account balances will the amount of stuff that we can buy with that money is going to shrink. So our real wealth may change over time because of the increase in price level. That is, it would decrease. Interest rates, similarly, we can think of nominal interest rates and real interest rates, and the real interest rate is calculated as the nominal interest rate. That's the number that's on your contract. If it says 6% interest and we experience 3% inflation, that means the real interest rate is that 6% nominal minus the 3% inflation. That leaves us with 3% real interest rates. And so if we think about, say, a student loan, that if you're able to refinance that at something like, I recently refinanced my student loans and have a nominal interest rate of 2% or so. So if we do experience inflation, that means I'll be paying back dollars that are effectively worth less than the ones I borrowed. That means my real interest rate could possibly be negative. There is not a good explanation on the causes of inflation that all economists agree upon. There's the question of whether, or I suppose it used to be more of a question of whether inflation was caused by increases in demand. So demand from the consumer side pushes prices upward, and the prices of the final goods and services being pushed upward results in a increase in the price of the resources that are used to produce those goods and services. That's the idea of demand pull inflation. The other side of that is that maybe wages and resources go up first. Or I say the alternative view rather is that resource prices go up first, and that precedes the increases in the prices of goods and services. That would be cost push inflation. But more recently, say in the past 25 or 30 years, there's probably been more economists agreeing with the idea that it is neither of these things, and in fact inflation is a result of increases in the money supply. That we use prices to measure or say what is the relative value of different goods and services and resources. And those real relationships seem to stay pretty consistent over time, and that increases in the money supply are responsible for increases in the money supply are what are responsible for inflation. And certainly we have microcosms of that in Zimbabwe and in Germany after World War II, where they experienced inflation that was just off the charts, and was a result of the government producing more and more money. Just increasing the money supply seemed to increase the price level, and the relationships among goods and services and resources, those didn't change. So if we think about going down to the Coke machine and the vending machine, and a candy bar is 50 cents and a Coke is $1, then one Coke is worth 2 candy bars in that sense, right? One is worth $1, one is worth 50 cents. So 2 candy bars cost the same as 1 Coke. And if all the prices were to, say, double because of inflation, then the price of a Coke would be $1, or it would be $2. The price of a candy bar would be $1, but the relative prices of those things would be constant, right? One Coke would still be worth 2 candy bars, and so this is what led Milton Friedman to say that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Sorry, that's not a direct quote, but the idea is that increases in the price level are due to increases in the money supply, and not either of these ideas of demand pull or cost push inflation. So knock out that homework, and we'll move on to chapter 15 next. Thank you.